Thank you. I'll continue right where she left off, Dr. Shakuri. The last answer got me just perfect because, so it's going to be voluntary. So who decides who puts that dot in a place that affects the cropping?
I'm going to continue my answer. So it can be voluntary, but in certain cases, in high-risk cases and high-impact
We don't do voluntary here in Congress, you know that.
I do, but I also do recognize that the way that we have structured regulation in the United States is context-specific. You know, financial authorities regulate.
Okay, well let's get a context because, and it's for a couple of you. If you've got a PhD, you're eligible to answer this question. And if you've published a book, you're eligible to answer this question. Now, the most knowledgeable person on AI up here at the dais that I know of is sitting in the chair right now. So, but he happened to say fair use. And of course, that gets my hackles up as the chairman of the subcommittee that determines what fair use is. Now, how many of you went to college and studied from books that were published for the pure purpose of your reading them, usually by the professor who wrote them? Raise your hand. Okay, nothing has changed in academia. So is it fair use to not pay for that book, absorb the entire content, and add it to your learning experience? So then the question, and I'll start with you because both Twitter time and academia time and so on, today everyone assumes that the learning process of AI is fair use. Is there any basis for it being fair use rather than maybe a standard essential copyright, one that it must be licensed? But if you're going to absorb every one of your published books and every one of the published books that gave you the education you have and call it fair use, are we in fact turning upside down the history of learning and fair use just because it's a computer?
I think the difference here is there's a difference between me borrowing a book from my friend, learning, and my individual impact on society.
Oh, because it's cumulative? Because you've borrowed everyone's book and read everyone's book?
Well, and because it's at scale. I cannot impact hundreds of millions of people around the world the way these models can. The things I say will not change the shape of democracy.
So I'll accept that. Anyone want to have a slightly different opinion on stealing 100% of all the works of all time, both copyrighted and not copyrighted, and calling it fair use and saying because you took so much, because you stole big, that in fact you're fine? Anyone want to defend that?
I'm sorry, I don't think that at all. I think it's wrong to do that. I think it's wrong
is one of the essential items that we must determine the rights of the information that goes in to be properly compensated, assuming it's under copyright?
Yes.
You all agree with that? Okay, put them in your computers and give us an idea of how we do it. Because obviously, this is something we've never grappled with. We've never grappled with universal copyright absorption. And hopefully, since all of you do publish and do think about it, and the RAND Corporation has the dollars to help us, please begin the process, because it's one of the areas that is it's going to emerge incredibly quickly. Now, obviously, we could switch from that to, we're talking about job losses and so on. One of my questions, of course, is for anyone who wants to hypothecate this, if we put all of the information in and we turn on a computer and we give it the funding of the Chinese Communist Party and we say, patent everything, do we in fact eliminate the ability to independently patent something and not be bracketed by a massive series of patents that are all or in part produced by artificial intelligence? I'm not looking at 2001: A Space Odyssey or Terminator. I'm looking at destruction of the building blocks of intellectual property that have allowed for innovation for hundreds of years. Most courageous, please.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm turning the mic on at this moment, but but I think there's a core for both two questions you asked. I think money actually matters. The reason that we haven't litigated fair use fully is there hasn't been much money made in these models that have been adjusting, incorporating all the copyrighted material.
But trust me, Google was sued when they were losing money too.
Yeah, but I do think the fact that there's a view that there's a market will change the dynamics about how, because people will start saying, wait, you're profiting off my content, and there will be, so I do think money changes this a little bit, and I think, it goes for the second question too, I think the pragmatics of money will change the dynamics. Anyway, it's a fairly simple observation on this point.
Thank you, and I apologize for dominating on this, but I'm going to Nashville this weekend and meet with a whole bunch of songwriters that are scared stiff. So anyone that wants to follow up, yes, if the chairman doesn't mind.
Yes, I think an interesting example, some people have been describing Hugging Face as some sort of kind of like a giant kind of like library. And in a sense, we accept that people can rent books at the library because it contributes to kind of like public and global kind of like progress. I think we can see the same thing there, where if we kind of like give access to this content for open source, for open science, I think it should be accepted in our society because it contributes to public good. But when it's for private commercial interest, then it should be approached differently. And actually, in that sense, open science and open source is some sort of a solution to this problem because it gives transparency. There's no way to know what copyright content is used in black box systems, like most of the systems that we have today. In order to take a decision.
That knocking says the rest for the record. He's been very kind. Thank you.